chaturanga, right? So that was handstand to chaturanga from downward facing dog. And there is no way on God's green earth that I would teach that to a beginner yogi. What I want to do is break down chaturanga for you and make it more accessible for you in your practice. I'm Kit Kat. Welcome to Introduction to Breath and Yoga, your guide to getting on the rubber rectangle. This is your tutorial on chaturanga. So, we've seen as we move through Sun Salutation A and Sun Salutation B, we come to this part of our Sun Salutation, or this vinyasa, that provides a massive challenge. And it's like the never-ending story, right? There's so many variations and so many things that you can do to help build strength and improve your chaturanga. How did chaturanga even come to exist in Sun Salutation? So in the previous tutorials, we mentioned that Krishnamacharya looked at a whole different range of fitness modalities and blended them together to create the Sun Salutation. So I almost view the Sun Salutation sometimes as like an interval training, where I found this beautiful Sthira-Sukhanasana, or steadiness and ease, in some of my shapes. And then as I move through my Sun Salutation, it's an opportunity to lift my cardio. Now, it doesn't always have to be like that. Some Sun Salutations can be very gentle and slow moving. And I encourage you, as you move through your yoga practice, to explore that gentleness of the Sun Salutation and the chaturanga in order to build your sustainable practice. If you go all hard out and you're training 3 hours a day, chances are you're going to drop that practice like a hot potato, because it literally, you will burn out before we even get to light the fire, baby. So let's look at chaturanga. So when Krishnamacharya invented this, that cheeky bugger, it was like he invented that move from a burpee. So where you go up, down, back, forward, and lift. Sun Salutation much? I think so. And what about the push-up? Hands up if you like push-ups. Not me. But in our chaturanga, do we have a push-up? We have a lowering down and a lift up. So almost like a push-up. So where we come from our four-limb staff pose, there it is, and there it is. Almost like a push-up. And there's the lift. Coming back into down dog. So, what form of yogi torture is this? I'm going to share with you the fact that I actually love chaturanga now. I want to eat chaturanga for breakfast. I don't really want to eat chaturanga for breakfast, but if you practice consistently and learn your way through this series of modifications, you will learn to love chaturanga, and it will become a part of your practice that is essential in linking different things together and finding that vinyasa and the infinite possibilities that lie within. Why do we practice chaturanga? Of course, arm and shoulder strength, essential as we move into more challenging asana like crow, arm balances, and handstand. And it's not essential that you move into handstand at all, but it's beautiful to have that shoulder mobility and also the strength. Why do we practice chaturanga? So that we can find a little bit more opening through the front body and a lift of the heart space, sending love out into the world, and lengthening through the back body. Did you know that back bending is not actually a bend into the spine, but it's actually an extension or a lengthening of the spine? Chaturanga is quite often the first move, where we come into Urdhva Mukha out of chaturanga, is often the first move where we've experienced a back bend in our yoga practice on any given day. So if you're doing Sun Salutation A and you come through chaturanga, lower down and lift up into Urdhva Mukha or into cobra pose or baby cobra, that's your first back bend of the day. So there are some glorious benefits to moving through chaturanga. So how do we get to chaturanga? First of all, we start in our downward facing dog, and we start with hands like starfish. Starfish is like my favorite animal. If you break a leg off, they grow an entire other starfish. Fascinating. So hands like starfish, that means we want to find as much space as we can between each of our fingers here, so that we've got really great stable base from which to work. I'm going to tell you at this point in time, like warming up through the hands and finding some movement in here. super important. And we're going to do some stretching at the end of this chaturanga demonstration and tutorial that is super going to help you in that space. And we're about to get visited by Layla puppy, who is a very aging dog that lives here in the villa, and she might even join us. Hopefully she'll move on. And here comes Charlie too to play in the space, and I think they're going off for a little play date in the garden today. So how do we move into chaturanga? We come from downward facing dog. So pressing our heels back and finding that connection to the earth with the hands. From here, we're going to shift forward into plank. So this is our four-limbed staff pose. And you can see that my shoulders are over my hands. So then, in addition to this, I'm going to lift up and out of my shoulders. So shoulder protraction. So I'm creating space between my shoulder blades here. I'm going to shift my body weight forward. Hello, Charlie. Exhale down. Inhale, lift up. And exhale, press back to downward facing dog. So quite a challenging shape. When we're talking about shoulder protraction and retraction, hello puppy, I love you too. Thank you for coming to my chaturanga tutorial. I know you have an excellent downward facing dog. So if my hands are in my space for chaturanga, this is shoulder retraction. So you can see it's like my shoulder blades are kind of squeezing together. As we move from plank, we want to press the earth away. So we have shoulder protraction, meaning that I've created a whole lot of space in between there. And this invites you or asks you to engage the abdominals to move through there. Now, Charlie, I'm going to have to ask you to move off the mat because I need to demonstrate chaturanga, and you, my little puppy friend, are not helping right now. So can you please hop out of the way? Charlie Papalina, I'm just going to roll you off to the side there. You can stay there. So we're going to come from downward facing dog, and we're going to move forward into plank with that protraction of the shoulder blades. We're going to even shift forward a little bit more because what we want to see is not the elbows moving, but the shoulders coming forward in that push-up. So we don't want to feel the elbows dipping back. We want the elbows to pretty much stay where they are, and we want to come forward into that shape and then lift up and press back. Now, that's a really big ask super early on as you're still building strength in the triceps and biceps. So how do we do that? When you come from downward dog, here are a couple of options to move through your chaturanga. Downward dog to tabletop. Then we're going to find a little shift forward and come into Ashtanga Namaskar. From here, slide forward into baby cobra. Exhale, press back, child's pose, a little bit active. Tuck the toes, lift the hips. So this variation, tabletop, Ashtanga Namaskar, meaning 8 points of contact. So as I come down, you can see chin, chest, hands, knees and toes. They're my 8 points. I'm going to inhale and lift the heart space into cobra or upward facing dog. Tuck the toes, press back into down dog. So what's variation number 2? Variation number 2 takes you from downward facing dog into plank. Then we're going to drop the knees down to the earth, and you can see my shoulders are pretty much over my hands. What I'm going to do is shift a little bit forward and take a push-up. From here, lift into Urdhva Mukha, and then back into downward facing dog. So you've effectively introduced half a push-up into your practice so you can build some strength. Again, it looks like this. We're going to move forward into plank, drop the knees down, and it might take a few goes to find where you're comfortable in this space. The elbows stay into the body. Inhale, slide forward and lift. Exhale, roll back over the toes and press into down dog. To build strength in that space, you can come down into that kind of ladylike push-up. And you can actually practice doing some push-ups into this space. So you want to engage the core so that you feel like you've got a lot of stability all the way from the base of the skull, all the way down to the tailbone. So as you press, the hands palms are just slightly outside of the shoulders so that you've got space in which to lower the body. I've engaged the belly, and I'm going to shift forward, elbows into the ribs, and press back up. So where I'm working here is into the triceps and into the shoulders. And if we want to bring that into Urdhva Mukha, I'm in my push-up, shifted forward slightly, elbows into the ribs, slide forward and lift. Roll over the toes, press back, downward facing dog. Then we move into regular chaturanga. As we move into this space, you can see how there are many, many different ways to challenge yourself and many, many different things to look at as you move through your chaturanga. Maybe on some days, like I really like to open up with Ashtanga Namaskar, those 8 points of contact. That's my first really beautiful, little, gentle baby back bend as I move into some of the larger back bends. What we don't want to do is rush at things and cause crunching in the spine or injuries in the shoulder. So make sure that you warm up and check in with you and make sure that you're feeling good about moving through different areas of your practice. By the same token, don't just hold back on something because there's a fear around that. Push past that and challenge yourself in ways that you haven't challenged yourself before. This growth that happens on the mat as we move through some of these more challenging asana expands you off the mat as well. So challenges that before you thought you might not be able to jump over that challenge or hurdle just become little pebbles on a pathway on the journey of your life. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot in class is, what do I do with the toes at the back? What do I do with the toes? So there's a couple of answers to this. As you come out of Urdhva Mukha, so you've got the legs engaged, the glutes engaged, the belly engaged in Urdhva Mukha. You're lifting the heart space. And so my toes are pointed, and you can see I'm moving my toes there. One of them is to roll over and press back. Another way to move out of that is to tap one toe at a time, lift and press back. And that may be an easier option for you. One of the things I used to do was I'd roll over my toes with my ankles. And I'm not going to tell you that that's the best option. I had to untrain myself to do that. I've seen yogis pop it and lift it as well. So that's like bouncing off the toes and lifting into your downward facing dog. So that is our chaturanga. Let's look at chaturanga from downward facing dog and back right through our sun salutation. There are things that you can do to build strength, push-ups, stretching, some of your arm holds and isometric contractions, arm lifts. All of these little nuanced moves through your yoga practice are going to help you build strength in your chaturanga. Opening up, squeezing the shoulder blades together and finding that openness in the heart space is almost like looking at your Urdhva Mukha. As you open up through the shoulders, back bends, reaching forward, giving yourself a hug, making sure that you're feeling that protraction of the shoulder blades through the back. Your sun salutation A, coming from downward facing dog. So we step back. I made a mistake there, didn't I? So from our sun salutation A, we actually hands, palms plant, and we step back into our plank. And from here, we either 8 points of contact, inhale and back, or we step back and we drop the knees, take a push-up, slide forward, roll over the toes and press back. Or alternatively, as we step back to plank, we take our shift forward and full chaturanga. Inhale, Urdhva. Exhale, Ardha Mukha. And guaranteed, after you've done a few of those, you're going to feel the heat or the tapas building in the body. There are some things that we can do with blocks, and occasionally on my reels I will post chaturanga modifications so that you can see perhaps something that might benefit you or help you work through that shape. And also what I wanted to look at was just some stretching for the arms, which I promised at the beginning of this chaturanga tutorial. Here in Bali, we ride a scooter a lot, so we have this grippy action of the hands. And so really important that we reverse that action. So a little bit of wrist rolling, super handy, because we do a lot of pressing away in our yoga practice. And even when we chaturanga, we've still got all of this action happening in the wrist here. So wrist rolls, going in the other direction, traffic lights, working through the fingers. You can take a stretch and open up through the forearm there and through the hand, so you're effectively overstretching the fingers, which feels really nice. Then we're going to stretch in the other direction. So flip the hands palms down, plant the outside of the hands onto the earth, and you can sit back and sink into that. I like to spread my fingers on the earth as I do this, and even move the hands or the fingers, closing the fists and moving back, and I can feel that stretch into my wrist, even turning it in. One time I actually saw somebody do a push-up like this on these hands. I was like, no. But actually feeling some of the movement in here and changing the direction of your hands as well, super helpful. One of the things that is a real gift to myself after practice is actually giving myself a little hand massage. So maybe just get some moisturizer. And as I mentioned before, particularly after riding our scooters here in Bali, to massage out the fingers and find, you know, little stretches here, and all these tiny little joints and ligaments feels really, really good. Stretching that out. Stretching that out. Ooh, this finger. About 2 weeks ago, I was making my bed and I was just smoothing out the sheet, and I have a stool at the end of my bed, smoothing out the sheet, whacked my finger on the stool, sprained my finger. It was like, I wasn't even doing anything fancy. I just sprained my finger while making my bed. I was like, what even is that, universe? And it's hurt for like 2 weeks now. It's really swollen, couldn't get my rings off my finger. Much better now, but I just felt it then when I was doing this stretch. And then pressing into the palm here and giving yourself a little massage. So a hot tip actually is that this little meridian point here, this little point in here, you can feel at that point where you get maximum pain. If you have a headache or like tension behind the eyes, squeezing into this pressure point on that meridian is going to rid yourself of that headache. Now, I learned that trick when I was in primary school. I don't even know who taught it to me, and I've held on to that trick for thinking it was a trick for so much of my life until I understood a little bit better about meridians and also our pranic system, our subtle energy system. We have 72,000 nadis or pressure points or energy systems as we move through there, and this is one of those. So if you get a headache, that's a really great pressure point to activate. My yogi friends, that is it from me and Charlie, who has no opposable thumb, and I'm not particularly sure if she was even helpful during this chaturanga tutorial, but I will see you on our next video where I break down some of the yoga shapes that we will use during our practice. Namaste, my yogi friends, and have a wonderful day. Don't forget to practice your chaturanga.